Joining me now, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. He served as the director for European Affairs at the National Security Council during the Trump administration. Colonel Vindman, good to see you. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Good to see you, Ali.
Some viewers of Fox News, that interview that we just took a clip of Donald Trump, that was a Sean Hannity interview. And if you were watching that on Hannity's show, you didn't hear that part. In fact, they cut that part out. They left out the part where Donald Trump says that the negotiation he would have come to, because he always thinks there's a deal to be made, would be to give some of that Russian-speaking part of Ukraine back to Russia. That's the underlying principle Russia has. Russia goes into countries where there are Russian speakers and says, you're Russian speakers, so this must be Russia. That's why the Baltics continue to press back on Russia. It's what happened to Poland in World War II. In fact, you and your family are Russian-speaking of Ukrainian descent.
Yeah, I think, the whole notion of Russian speaking is kind of, almost irrelevant. There are a lot of different populations that speak different languages,
sure,
but they're not necessarily associated with the nationality. For Russia, it's a kind of a fundamental notion or a way to hang on to this notion that they are entitled to a sphere of influence in their near abroad because there are Russian speakers. Folks that you have to remember, because Russia and the Soviet Union and Imperial Russia were imperial power with colonies, it forced these populations to speak Russian. That's the only way these populations could survive. So yes, they're Russian speaking because of Soviet and Russian oppression, but the distinction is frankly meaningless. What I take away from that conversation is, hopefully we get dispensed with this notion that under Donald Trump, we would not be in a world where Russia would be conquering Ukraine. In fact, we would be, except it wouldn't be the concerted efforts of the democratic world, NATO, pushing back on Russian aggression, preserving a rules-based order. Instead, it would be, frankly, Donald Trump gifting to Russia Ukraine, or parts of Ukraine, which is this really, frankly, absurd notion. It would never have been a viable course of action, but that's where Trump started, because he has an extremely simplistic notion about how to make national policy work, how to make foreign policy work. It's pretty absurd. I saw it multiple times. He would just kind of attempt to wheel and deal and usually fall flat on his face.
But we do know that whether he wanted it or not, he got some help from Russia in 2016 and in 2020. So maybe there's some advantage to him saying the quiet part out loud here. Maybe there's some advantage to saying, if I were president, I'd end this war. I could end this war by letting Russia carve out a little piece of Ukraine.
Yeah, it seems to undermine his kind of fundamental strongman persona, where he would be too tough, too strong. That doesn't jive with me. I think it probably doesn't jive with the viewers. That if you give somebody something away for free, you're not really a deal maker. You're not really a strongman. You're kind of just bending over backwards to appease whoever you're going to, whether that's out of fear or weakness, intimidation, whatever the case might be. That's definitely not a show of strength. But this is the way kind of Donald Trump, we're in our second year of this major war, this geopolitical earthquake, and still Donald Trump makes these kind of nonsensical claims. On the one hand, saying it would never happen. On the other hand, he was saying he would give it away, appeasement, kind of World War II Chamberlain-like, and somehow in his mind, and nothing really comes together logically, but in his mind it makes sense.
Alexander, stand by for a second. I got to fit in a quick break. Alexander Vindman joins me now. Bill Burns saying that we have to provide all the support that we can, NATO and the West, to Ukraine. Do you concur that we're providing all the support that we can?
We're not. Unfortunately, our rhetoric and the urgency of the moment doesn't necessarily align with the actions that we've taken so far. Don't get me wrong. The U.S. has done an enormous amount of heavy lifting here, donated billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars in aid, but we have not provided everything to Ukraine that they need to win. And this is critically important because actually I completely agree with the director of the CIA. We're looking at a campaign cycle. Right now, the Russians are in an offensive, the Ukrainians are in a defensive. They'll shift to a counteroffensive in the spring and summer. And if the Ukrainians are successful in liberating territory, really, frankly, compelling compelling Putin to negotiate, we'll be in a position where we could start to see a wind down of this conflict, kind of a a cooling off in a long kind of negotiation process. If Ukraine is not successful in liberating territory, then Putin will kind of get a reprieve, potentially go through another round of mobilization, and we could see another campaign cycle, another offensive. But that's going to be another kind of now 9 or 12 or 15 months from now. So that's why there's a great urgency to give Ukraine everything that they need to be successful in this coming campaign.
Earlier, I broke bread with a smart man, a Colonel Vindman, your brother, Yevgeny Vindman, and he took the same argument that the Director of National Intelligence has made, and that is literally with every week this war goes on, Russia sees that as an advantage. They see a long war as their best chance to win this.
Why wouldn't they? I mean, in the Trump-captured Republican Party, represented by Speaker McCarthy, basically you have McCarthy visiting January 6th insurrectionists rather than accepting an invite like his predecessor, Secretary Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi, to visit Ukraine. I mean, this kind of leads into why Putin conducted this war in the first place. He thought that he would have an easy go of it with half of the political elites, the Republican Party. He would be held unaccountable. And I think that's kind of part of the formula here. You wear down kind of the vulnerabilities, the differences between inside countries, between countries, and on that basis, potentially support for Ukraine diminishes, and then Russia has the advantage of size and economic base. In reality, I think he's wrong. I think the fact is that Ukrainians have a very good chance of being successful through the rest of this year. Russia may very well run out of military capacity and be forced to negotiate to hang on to whatever kind of crumbs it can, Crimea primarily. But I think that there's, long war scenario. If we don't do enough, this plays out over the course of another year beyond this point, then we get into danger areas.
You brought up Kevin McCarthy. I want to just play you a clip of what Zelensky has said about McCarthy and what McCarthy said in response. Let's listen.
I think that Speaker McCarthy, he never visited Kyiv or Ukraine, and I think it would help him with his position. When you come to us, when both the Democrats and Republicans come to us, they see the supply routes, every shell, every bullet, every dollar.
I will continue to get my briefings and others, but I don't have to go to Ukraine or Kiev to see it. And my point has always been, I won't provide a blank check for anything.
It was hard to hear McCarthy, so I'm just going to read you what he said. I will continue to get my briefings and others, but I don't have to go to Ukraine or to Kyiv to see it. And my point has always been, I won't provide a blank check for anything. Your response?
I think the fact is that this is a complete kind of red herring that the U.S. funds are being wasted or squandered. In reality, I think the Ukrainians have been very meticulous to make sure that there's not the kind of the habitual pattern of corruption that affects this aid that's going to Ukraine. I think as well as things can be accounted for in war, they are. This is all completely Kevin McCarthy kind of pandering to the extreme wing of his party, to the kind of to this Trump-captured portion of it, and not wanting to show some sort of weakness to what he promised them, which was that he was going to start to diminish ties to Ukraine.
Colonel Vindman, good to see you as always. Thank you for being with us. It's a big treat to me to spend time with two Vindman brothers today. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman gets tonight's last word.